thinking about different ways of viewing AI. And fundamentally, the parallel he likes to use is instead of it being a tool or a servant, AI is an instrument. And there are different ways to approach the using of an instrument or the playing of an instrument or how you might do it. And that struck a chord with you, no pun intended, but I do appreciate that came up that on the spot with you, Stacey, right?
It did. I really love this image, and I think it actually fits better than what all these other boxes we've been trying to put it into, which is we talk a lot about orchestration, that AI does orchestration, but I think actually humans kind of do we have to kind of figure out the world that we're in, and AI is one of those components, and how you leverage it, how you use it. It's like an instrument, and you could use it really well, or you could use it not so well. I played the clarinet. There was, for a couple of years I was first chair. Y'all know what that is. That means I was doing really good. There's a lot of years that I was in the back of that row, right? I was not doing that instrument very well. And I think this is a lot of where it's going to be at, right? We're all going to have good AI and bad AI. It's going to come down to how it's managed effectively as an instrument, right?
Welcome to the HR Huddle podcast, presented by Sapient Insights Group, the ultimate resource for all things HR. It's time to get in the huddle.
Welcome, everyone, to Spill the Tea on HR Tech, where we focus on the hottest HR tech news everyone needs to know to be in the know. We break down the news of the week and help you make sense of what it means for our industry and how it can help your organization. And we're recording today, it's November 5th. We're already heading towards the holidays, 2025, bringing you all the news you can use this week. I'm your host, Stacey Harris, Chief Research Officer of Sapient Insights Group and Managing Partner. And joining me today is my counterpart and partner in crime, Cliff Stevenson, Director of Research and Principal Analyst here at our Research and Advisory Group. Cliff, welcome to the show. You and I have been in the same city and then not in the same city in 3 different cities all in the last 3 days. Literally, it's only Wednesday. How is it not the end of the week already? It's been nonstop, right?
How's it not the end of the year? It has been, I don't know why I thought, okay, we've been so geared up, so excited about the report coming out, which it does and has, and you'll be talking about that. And I guess in my head, I was thinking, and then it'll be relaxing time. But no, this is conference season. I can't complain. You were in a different city earlier.
I know. I was at Las Vegas. I flew through the night, got to Newark, and then drove to Philadelphia to do my keynote at the iSolved event, and which by the way went well and beautiful. And it's been, I think, it is interesting when we do these fall event conference season things, because we want to get out and share the data. This is our favorite time to be out talking about stuff. I had new data I was able to share up on stage, and it always makes me excited. And you always get the oohs and the ahs from the audience because they hadn't seen it yet. But it's also the time when everyone else is trying to also talk at the same time. So it is a little overwhelming because you got all the big vendors trying to launch stuff, and everybody's doing 3rd and 4th quarter sales. The practitioners are trying to figure out how the hell to get done whatever they said they were going to get done this year before next year starts. So it is it's a wild and crazy time of the year. And then we're all trying to get everything done before we go into the holidays so we can get a little bit of a break and some family time. And I think this year even more so, everybody wants to just breathe a little bit and get some time with those we care about. So yeah, it's been crazy. But you and I both had really good weeks this week. You were still at the Aspire conference with UKG right now, right? Background. You even had to fix your Las Vegas weird pictures in the background,
I am in Vegas, and this will be a special bonus for those of you that watch it on YouTube. You did say partner in crime. I did have to adjust where my camera is because there's a little bit of, I would say it's NSFW, but it certainly isn't something that's featured on an HR podcast. But yes, still in Vegas. It's been a really exciting time. And as you said, Stacey, this is a really busy time for all of us, right? For anyone in our industry, for anyone that's out there in HR doing the work. And we understand that, you also need to sort of separate all of these voices talking. And that's part of what this podcast is. And, last week, we were lucky enough to be able to share a little bit of the inside information, or I should say 2 weeks ago, by the time you hear this, that we did with George LaRoque. And we want to thank you all. I know that was a little different than what we usually do. But we also have a lot of stories to get through. So this is going to be a sort of catch up. We're not just going to ignore those 2 weeks prior. We've got a month's worth of information and stories to tell you. So this is going to be the extra large end of year extravaganza. The report is out. We're celebrating that. We've got all sorts of stuff to tell you. So buckle up. We hope you have a very long commute today, or you can hear us on the way in and the way out, however you want to do it. But be prepared.
Get some coffee in between, then come back and chat. We're okay with all that. Cliff was trying to get his tea before we started all this. He's got dinner plans after this, so we're still and for I think it's Pete is reaching out to you and
goes George Rogers.
They're all wanting Pete, and they all wanting Cliff to go out tonight to enjoy himself in Las Vegas for his last night there tonight. And of course, I'm like, hey, let's do the podcast recordings. We got to get it in tomorrow.
It's for the people.
My fault, guys, when you hear this.
No. People have been coming to me, all of our fans. They're lining up, tears in their eyes. When are we going to get another spilling the tea? I said, we can't deny the crowds.
Okay. We're getting a little deep now. We should probably. All right. We've obviously hit our mark on past the point of silliness, but we do have a lot going on, right? We got the report launched. I mean, I think last time they would have heard from us, we were just getting to a point where we were at the end of the season. I don't know if you told this audience, Cliff, about the Hobbit, right? Like that to me is the coolest thing. Every year you come up with the best book for us to say how many words we've written, right?
That's right. This year, the report is 380 pages. It is we went from a novella last year when we did the word count. It was 1984 from George Orwell, which I thought was pretty interesting and fitting because we were talking about AI and some surveillance thing. Interesting. This year, 380 pages and 95,316 words, which is the closest word count to that was The Hobbit. Also, The Girl from the Train, to take your pick. I find The Hobbit to be a little more interesting, right? A journey of discovery, a journey of, finding things that could be valuable that you may not know at the time. I like all that sort of stuff. I'm not saying that our paper is better than The Hobbit necessarily. Read it, you decide. Maybe.
Are we going to say that it's going to help you find it is the research the one to rule them all, right? Are we getting that deep into the sci-fi, right?
That's right. I mean, that comes into the later books, but we'll see how next year's goes.
All right. Okay, so the book is out. The paper is out. The research report is out. We had 10,000 participants, over 4,600 individual companies in the data set. And what's really nice this year is, yes, you can go buy the report, and I just got this number from Terry, and so I do want to just make a shout out to all of our people who listen to us who actually took the survey. I think we have not quite over 500 who have downloaded it. We know there's over 2,000 of you who have access to it, plus more after that. So if you didn't see it in your email box, go access it, click it. Because it's going to get you into our research center, which is our new community research center, which gives you access to some other things as well. We cannot do PDFs anymore. I know that's how we've delivered it for years, but it's too big. Like it would literally break your phone and everything else. So the best way to access it is to go through our research center now, and it gives you free access to that. So you do have to type in your name and give us a little information. We try and be as little requirement as possible, but making sure that we know who it is who's accessing it, because you put all the time into getting the report. Cliff, we also have some segments that they can access individually in that community center, as if they didn't get a chance to do that, maybe if they just want recruiting or if they just want talent, they have those segments that they can get in the report that you're working on right now as well, right? That's right.
I mean, by the time you hear this, every single segment will be out. At the time of recording, we still have 2 or 3 to upload, but you could go into just looking at some of the talent. You could look at just the emerging tech if you want to hear about AI, because this year we do actually get the user experience and vendor satisfaction for these AI tools. So if you're saying, I'd like to know whether people seem to prefer Claude over ChatGPT for work, and see a little bit about that, where you can look for just that section. Or if you just
and it is very different by company size in that. That's what I was intrigued by, right? And there's some interesting ones that show up in there, right?
There's ones, I'll admit that I see Perplexity, and I was like, oh, I see people are really using this a lot for a sort of search and research. Ones like 11 Labs, the voice to text and vice versa. And you can see how that would be very valuable in learning content and those providers, and why people would see that. And you start going, oh, that's very interesting. And it's just We even have things on the business of HR and strategy and change, leading through change. So if you're more on that side and you want to kind of figure out the next 2 years, we've got information for you there too. So sort of pick and choose, and of course the full report, as you called it, a book. I don't know if that was a Freudian slip, because it is.
And every year we think, well, I've been kind of pitching the idea that maybe we should do kind of space out launching it. And I'm getting real pushback. Maybe it's because of the vendors and they all want to see their data when it comes out as quickly as it comes out. But I'm not getting anybody saying, yes, we'd like it spaced out. So I don't know, Cliff, I know you and I have been talking about it, but I don't know if they're going to allow us to do it, right? So, community will have to speak. We'll see what they say. But I haven't anybody go, oh yeah, it'd be great if I got talent in January.
Personally, I'm in favor of the opposite. I want to make one big bound edition, like those big Bibles you'd see at the churches or something like that, or at least it could be used for home defense type purpose.
Exactly. Kids get them up to the table, their seat, right? Yeah. We have no more phone books in the world, right? Like the other day, someone was asking me, like, how to, if you don't have a seat thing for your toddler, what do you do? And I was like, well, we used to use phone books. I don't know what you guys use. There's no phone books anymore. Showing my age. On top of that, I do want to say one of the big topics that we are doing a lot of conversation about is we do have a special survey out in the market right now. It is about compliance. We are trying to understand how organizations are accessing compliance, working in compliance, what's valuable to them in compliance. We are having a lot of people ask us about compliance issues. So if you do see that email from us, that is from us. We know you're always worried about whether or not there's spam or weird people sending stuff out. That's our survey. It's not something we normally do off cycle, but we just felt we have a couple of organizations. I listed some vendors who are looking for some of that data, but more importantly, on an aggregate level, we're looking to be able to share it back with you guys. So we'd love to hear your thoughts and your voices on what's going on in the compliance space. And you'll see by the questions that it's really focused on the compliance data compared to sort of where you're getting the access from it. And we don't ask that many in the research on it this year. We might just weave some of that into next year's survey because I do think compliance is a big topic. We're going to talk quite a bit about it this week, right, Cliff?
Absolutely. It was something that we've touched on a few times. I think it's kind of fascinating to think back on. I know we're not at the end of the year, but the sort of longer ones got me in that mindset of looking about what we talked about on these episodes of Spilling the Tea and realizing that it's kind of coming full circle. One of the things we talked about since January was that blurring of the lines, what really constitutes HR technology. And sure enough, we see an expansion of our paper because of that, because it is more all-encompassing, right? We're taking a much more holistic approach, and AI is one of those things that ties everything together. And then we started to see sort of AI being used in different ways, and both the strengths and weaknesses, and finding a lot of value in compliance, and a lot of organizations that are succeeding because of their strength in compliance, a lot of these vendors. And it's interesting because on one hand, you could think of it as there's this sort of future looking thing with the AI and all the things it could do, but there's also a whole lot of value in building that foundation so that you can sort of build the rocket to go to the future, right? Building that compliance and strengthening that. And we're seeing it played out in some really real ways that we're going to get to in some of these stories. And we've been talking about compliance all year, and the chorus is growing louder.
Yeah, foundations are foundations no matter where you go. I've always been a big proponent of that because I've seen so many times where we build on top of stuff that's not stable. And compliance is an area where we really do have to have stability. I know we've been at 3 events in just the last 3 weeks, right? So I know one of the things, you went to Oracle's Cloud World event, and I know they had quite a bit about compliance and AI. Do you want to give a little bit of an update on what you heard there from them, Cliff? I know it feels like it's been an eon ago, but it's only been, I think, about 2 weeks since you've been there, right?
No, it was.
And I don't know if it's Cloud World anymore. Wasn't it called Oracle AI World now, right? Like, didn't they change the name midstream, like 2 weeks out or something like that?
It is AI World. And that's actually a very good segue, because that was very interesting to me, because during the summer, and this has been noted by a few different people, the sort of sentiment, the public sentiment, as we've talked about, towards AI shifted somewhat. It wasn't as positive. People really started looking at external impacts and finding they were kind of running up against walls of really what could be done. And not to mention the sort of financial background or the financial sort of things that were going on. Like, is this here to stay? Is this a bubble? All this sort of thing is going on. But Oracle said, no, we're gonna double down this, to the fact that they even changed the name of their conference. And I will give them credit because they said, no, this is really going to be what defines us moving forward. And a lot of that is that they're tied in with their Starlink data centers and all of the other physical stuff they've got going on, a lot of investments in OpenAI and purchases from NVIDIA. But they've also really been thoughtful, and we saw this in a lot of the sessions and a lot of talks they gave to us in the analysts and media about they didn't want to just sort of insert AI. They really were going to the customers and going, what is it that could help you? And then giving them products and creating agents that could do it. They talked a lot about the usage of AI and really tracking that. That's something that we hadn't seen from a lot of vendors, of saying, we are looking to see who uses it. They were fascinated by our research and a few others that actually showed, are people using the embedded AI in your product? And they were one of the very few ones that actually had, I think, over 50% or...
Yeah, when they were in our top 5, and if you just look at HRMS, there's some other things that add into it. Like if you add the people who are currently using it and the people who are implementing it, you'd get in that like 30-40% range, yes. Right? Like they would have the highest number if you combine those who are implementing and purchasing it. They're in the top 5 for those who are currently implementing. And that's an interesting thing, because I don't think we think in some cases about people implementing AI in the HRMS system. A lot of people think it's like just turning it on, but it's not. There's some real work there, right? I don't know if Oracle talked about that at all or not.
Oh, absolutely. And that was a lot of my questions as well. It's like, how are you finding out where those gaps are, right? That was my question to their head of product is, all right, that's great, but how do you figure out those remaining people that are using it? Why aren't they using it? How are you tracking through, companies like FairNow or Lanai? Seeing, people are not seeing what they need. And so they're bringing in the bring your own AI.
Bring your own AI, yes.
I don't know how to say that yet. But they're going to be talking to us more about that. But that's the question. They want to try to track that usage so they can figure out not just how people are using it, but where are they not using it. And does that mean they need to adjust their systems? Because that goes into the implementation in terms of course, the hardware, right? Because they've got to figure out the training and the compliance measures and regulatory measures, but also the services that go around that, right? There could be anything from, as we said, the change management, but, that could also be
configuration services. It's security services we're hearing organizations come up with, right? We're also hearing services come up that are being formed around, even to some extent, is price management, because of how the pricing is changing, consumer-based pricing. So understanding through the tiers you're going to hit, when you're going to hit them, managing how much you're using, and is it being used in the right way? Like that's something I'm hearing some organizations even come up with some services around, right?
Yeah, and actually that's a brilliant segue, because I'll talk about what I've just been talking to UKG about. As I'm at their Aspire conference right now, I'm going to be doing a presentation along with Bob Green, who will be leading that. I'll be hanging around for some Q&A about our report and what's come out. But Bob today did one on, I think he called it Tame Your AI Dragon, right? Because it can kind of get out of control if you don't sort of rest both the present usage, but also the future usage, and thinking about that. Yesterday, we were joined in the analyst room by the head of go-to-market AI, or AI go-to-market for Google Cloud, one of the big hyperscalers. It's going to come up later. I predict a little teaser there. Everyone wants to hear about the hyperscalers. But that was my question to him. What are you doing for cost management? How are you working with these HCM vendors to prepare them, or for the end users to prepare them for that? And his answer was very direct. He said, on one hand, we urge people to think about where you find the greatest use, think about the ROI of your systems so that you can kind of figure out the price point of these and not just become over-reliant, but also that they are looking at developing they are making their own chips and working with some of those systems to kind of get into the manufacturing and give them some sort of direct price control. Because that is a major concern, Stacey. You're spot on, that people aren't considering and have to be, because they're not going to get cheaper.
They're not right now. I mean, they may over time. I mean, I remember back in the day, again, back in the day when I was a young kid, right, walking uphill both ways in the snow. we used to think internet access was always going to be ridiculously expensive, right? Like, I mean, that's why we were never going to take off with doing stuff at work over the internet, because it was going to be so expensive. And that changed almost overnight once the big pipelines came in, once we basically got fiber laid by all the big telephone companies. Now, a lot of telephone companies lost their shirts putting all that in before the market was ready for that. There's been a little bit of parallel we're seeing to that with the big hyperscalers putting in big AI farms, right? The question is, will there be enough demand for it in a quick enough time frame to make the money back that is needed for those industries? We'll see. But I think that's the same kind of conversation, right? Which is, but for at least next 2 years, you're definitely not going to see any decreases in cost in that area, right?
That is a brilliant example, because I also think of that with mobile phone usage. I remember at the beginning, you would watch your data like a hawk.
Oh yeah.
Right? You change plans all the time, because it's like, oh, this one. And then when they started seeing unlimited plans, those are so expensive, but people were like, oh, it's worth it. Now it's,
Oh, I left my video shooting for the last 2 hours. I forgot I was doing that with an audio.
To get a second mortgage. But yeah, and then there's been other things that have gotten, more expensive over time too. So it is worth watching, and I think it comes down to, we'll figure out what that equilibrium is going to be. But we're in the early days of technology, and I think you're right.
I mean, some of the other things I think that UKG was really focusing on, which I really like. I mean, you hone in on the AI stuff, but what I really liked that Jennifer Morgan had really kicked off with was not AI conversation. It was much more about that workforce and understanding the data around the labor dynamics, but what we're calling the global labor paradox, which is really a big issue, which is we're seeing people both not able to find the critical talent they need to do the job, and yet their businesses are asking them to actually either lose people through attrition or lay people off, right? Like, especially if you're in your big company, and that we're seeing like increase for demand go up and more overtime for people, right? I love that she started off the whole conversation at UKG's Aspire, because I was there just for that first 2 days, but with that conversation, and then how AI is going to support that work. One of the big things they rolled out was this workforce intelligence hub that they are kind of consolidating under their AI model. I think somebody posted, it was Jessica Chung or one of them, who had done an update on that. And she'd said when Corey had explained it to you guys that it sounded much more like he connected it to Tron, I think she said, right? So, I mean, you've been there for an extra day on content and information. Is there anything else big that you think that they're announcing? Because, I mean, I don't think that's surprising. I think it is what we've been expecting them to do. I'm excited to see them do it. But were there some other things that they showed that you thought like the market should really be watching them for?
Yeah. So what they've been doing really under Jen Morgan and Rachel Barger's watch is becoming focused, just as we talked about before, about really thinking about solving problems. They see themselves, and they are positioning themselves in creating a company that is perfect for frontline workers, right? That's what they want to be. And they also have the workforce operating platform, right? This is sort of scaling across and thinking about everything about solving problems in the flow of work. That's what all of this is, rather than being sort of a suite that can kind of do that. Instead, it's a set of tools, or I think we're going to talk about later, a collection of instruments, gives people that are doing the work the ability to function and create and deliver goods as it happens, right? That takes workforce planning rather than being sort of a separate concern, but all encompassing within the HR systems, right? So they say HR, workforce planning, payroll, all of that is just under that sort of workforce operating platform, right? This is a culmination of what we've been talking about. What is HR tech and what is just work tech? And they are saying we're going to take the lead on that. Jen Morgan, who, by the way, has fantastic fashion sense. I think someone got a photo of the three of us all wearing.
We were in sync on the pink, right?
It was interesting, right? Because there are a lot of people in the yellow and the teals and the new branding colors. She was in the pink, but it also gave us an opportunity to kind of talk about that a little bit. And they're all in on the frontline workers and the people kind of, moving and shipping and providing goods and services across the world. They've expanded, of course, their global footprint. We talked to, Richard from ProView and all of that today too. They've grown by 57%. So they're really into this idea of this holistic movement of people and goods and services around and how they can best make that happen, rather than just pigeonholing themselves as an HR suite or something like that.
Yeah. It's a necessary conversation to get both the industry plus the workforce conversation, right? And the industries they mentioned over and over again, I think, were healthcare, manufacturing, as well as, like you said, sort of global logistics and that kind of work, right? Not to say they're not going to do other industries. I think they're and retail. Sorry, retail was the other big one, right, with the global logistics. Not to say they're not going to do it, but they were definitely leaning into that at a much heavier level. The other thing I think that we should probably mention is they did have a little bit of an update. I'm hoping they gave you guys more of an update on there's sort of 3 acquisitions that have come pretty quickly that have supported that frontline worker. One, and I want to make sure I get it right because it's Chatter, right? That's the high volume hiring software platform that they did just recently. They also acquired Shiftboard, which is an employee scheduling software that sort of adds to their already very extensive scheduling capability, right? And then they also, it was an announcement at this event, right? We're allowed to mention the third one, right? The Mo, UKG Labs, an employee engagement platform with employee recognition. That's a new one for them. Cliff, you've been tracking Mo for a while, or at least the rewards recognition space for a while, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, in fact, all of those have already been incorporated into this platform. This sort of, they're not sort of standalone products, they're in. So already this has become rapid hire and dynamic labor management. When you talked about Shiftboard, right? That's part of what fuels dynamic labor management and rapid hire for Chatter, which has been brought in, and they are what they sound like, right? Rapid hire is designed for organizations that need to make very quick amounts of hiring that may not have been planned for. The example they used was during a large weather event. Living in Florida, now you're in North Carolina.
Those linemen come in and they got to be brought in from all over the country to fix lines when they're down, right? Like, I mean, it's a real thing, right?
Yeah.
So yeah,
and one of the things we talked to them about was, okay, will this pair with services? And they said, absolutely. That's 100% of how we see this. So you'd work with all of your third-party groups that may provide staffing or logistics, but also, again, it's meant to work with how people work. It's a mobile-first platform. Someone comes in, they say, okay, there's a little QR code. They scan. I'm holding up a phone. This is very, for people listening to just a podcast, I'm trying to give an example. They would, scan it. They'd say, are you available to, what days are you going to work? Oh, I can work weekends. Great. That's what we need. Here's your interview. It's already there, right? And then all of that comes in, and then the dynamic labor management comes in through Shiftboard is saying, okay, we're filling in the schedule. This person has these preferences. This is all happening. And it's just done. You're starting Monday as long as if this person passes the interview. All that onboarding is done. All the paperwork is being handled. The manager, who's probably going through it at this moment, just finds that they have the staff that they need in this ideal situation. And that's taking all of these acquisitions, and it's purposeful as part of a solution to a business problem, which is what you want to see.
Yeah, and I do know they're also, because we just got to account, like this year, UKG, they got one in the number one sort of total number 5s across the most number of systems, right? But their user experience management has been down a little bit. And I think, part of that, it's been down. It's not, I think, as any organization goes through big transitions, Jen Morgan's been very upfront about this. They are transitioning their leadership. They're transitioning a lot of their support roles. They're trying to reinvigorate that with the AI. And so what was really nice was to hear, I think, a lot of focus on, even at the point where we know that UKG's got a lot of financial decisions they're going to make in the next couple of years, right? And even their new CFO, Arlen, was very clear, like, hey, if you do right by the customers, you're going to do right by the rest of the market, right? Like your data and your numbers will come. And so I think, there was a lot of what I was really excited about was the investment they're making in customer care to support all of that stuff that you were just talking about, because it's a lot of pieces and parts all now being added to the picture. A lot of infrastructure work. Suresh, the chief product officer, was talking about all that infrastructure work. That's not always the sexiest stuff, right? But it is the most critical side of things. And we are hearing them invest in it. My expectation is that those numbers will go up next year to kind of match the investment that they're making in that. One of the things I know also is that all of that you just talked about was a heavy compliance conversation, right? Like none of that sits outside of the compliance. And you said one of their customers, I think, had actually talked about a topic we were going to talk about, which is the California compliance law recently, right?
Yeah, this is, and forgive me, actually, I won't even say their name because I do believe that might have been under NDA.
Might have been under NDA, yeah.
But It was a large company that is in Central California, and they had been struggling with the fact that for certain classifications of workers, healthcare workers being one of them, the minimum wage moved from 18 to 25. So they needed a system that could quickly make sure that they were under compliance, make sure the right classifications were there for the right workers. You can't just blanket across a person who works at a hospital. They're not all in healthcare, right? There are janitors, there are administrators, and making sure that those people were paid the right amount for the hours from the moment that that came into place, right? You don't want to make mistakes either way. Those can cost you quite a bit. Now, and it was a really interesting and feel-good story. I hope that one day we can go into more detail, because by the time this comes out, I think it'll be all right to mention that this is going to happen. But this employer said they took the savings that they got from that healthcare movement and actually gave it back, or is planning on giving it back to the employees. They said, we actually saved money by doing this, because we would have lost it trying to do it manually. This ended up being a cost savings for us. We have this extra $1 million. Let's distribute it across the employees, especially going into the holidays. And I just found that was really nice.
That's the kind of good stuff you like to hear. And like this is like turning compliance into a strategic conversation now, right? Yes. Like it's a talent conversation, but doing it in a more effective way. I know sort of where I was at just today, this morning, gosh, it's 7 o'clock in the morning. It's now 10 o'clock at night here, right? I was in Philadelphia delivering the keynote on elevating the HR function at iSolved. And not a lot of new stuff coming out. They do that stuff at different events. But what I really love at those events, we've gotten to do 3 of them, and we'll do a 4th one now next week in Scottsdale. So by the time everybody hears this, we'll sort of be through all 4 of them. One is that iSolved's invested in this great research. So basically, one of the things that we do with our research, people may not know this, is that nobody sponsors our data. Our data, when we capture our data, it is all done. We figure out how to pay for it up front, and then we hope people will buy the research afterwards. That is the goal we have in doing the research. So it is vendor neutral and is not sponsored and does not rely on that. But there are times when vendors will come to us and say, I think there's an idea that there are some things that I'd like to understand better. And so they will pay for us to dig deep into that data and find information that is in areas that they're trying to figure out. And one of the areas that iSolve wanted to figure out was, how do you take, particularly in the SMB and the mid-market, and what is the difference between those organizations who are viewed as strategic versus those who are not? And look at that both from a perception perspective as well as an activities perspective, and even to some extent, the demographics of the people who are in those roles, right? Female, male, different diversity levels, different levels of how long they've been in the organization, age groups. How is that impacting all the decisions that are being made at the HR level? And it was a fascinating study. We did it earlier this year. I've now been kind of presenting the data over this last couple of years, or this last couple of months. And this one here in Philadelphia was particularly interesting because not only was there a lot of conversation about AI, which there always is these days, but there was an audible gasp in the room when I said how much finance and HR do not see eye to eye around how strategic HR is. And finance is the least likely function. And a good portion of the people in the room actually report up through finance. It is where we're at in SMBs. And the other conversation that we got into deep in this was, how do we help make compliance a strategic conversation versus this sort of thing I've got to do that that conversation you just had was a great one of like, I've got these laws that are going to cost me money, I think, and they're going to make me upset. And particularly if I have owners of small businesses, that regulations seem to be the bane of their existence a lot of times. But if you really do it right, you might actually be able to not only save money, you might be able to be ahead of it. You might be a employer of choice because you are getting out in front of a lot of this conversation from a compliance perspective. So we had a lot of that conversation at this event too. So it's good to see a lot of this connecting. I think all the vendors are doing a really good job of understanding the value of what they're offering through both compliance, but also through their roles as sort of guardrailing AI. But I think not everyone talks about how you help elevate that HR role. And that's kind of the big thing we're really looking at for a lot of organizations, right?
Yeah. And speaking of compliance, I don't know. I'm trying to think if by the time this comes out, will our compliance survey still be out? Because I'd love to get some of the information, or
we can share a little bit of the details and highlight. I believe it still will be out. I don't think we're closing it until the 21st, but if not, we'll make sure we put a link with it when we do all this.
Yeah, because if possible, I'm sure that there's some people here that might have some thoughts.
Without a doubt, right? Like, it is a big topic right now, because I actually think AI is going to really impact that market, not just from I'm going to automate it. Yeah, I'm going to be able to make it more accessible. Because actually there's a little bit of danger there because people are using ChatGPT to look up regulations. Do not recommend that. That's not the way to go. You might use it as a starting point, but you definitely want to go to a trusted source on that conversation. But I do think it's going to help us start to figure out the value proposition of doing compliance the way we should be doing it and why it has a benefit to the society that we're working in. Like, compliance generally is not done just to make people's lives miserable. I know a lot of people sometimes think that regulations are that way, but generally it's done because there's some bigger thing, like, for example, the minimum wage or the issue with classification of workers, or, if a worker's not classified right, they don't get unemployment, which means that if things happen in the market rate, there's some real societal issues that we're trying to deal with in compliance. And most people get that and understand that. But sometimes the businesses don't understand the value that brings back to them. And I do think AI can help them see that loop closed in a way that they maybe couldn't have done because it's all very sort of big and esoteric. So I'm excited about this. So yeah, we definitely would love to have people participate in that. Yeah.
That'd be wonderful. And also, I want to go back to something you mentioned, the audible gasp when people thought about, HR and finance not seeing eye to eye. That's something we have been talking about too, about HR and these different departments that exist within. IT has been a big story, HR and IT. And I just wanted to make sure that we let people know that we have a webinar, right?
Yeah, we have a webinar with ADP. We are partnering up with a well-known IT and industry analyst, Tim Crawford, who has agreed to join us. So we'll put his name and post some information down below if you're interested in it. Basically, we're going to do a really great kind of come together to talk about how HR and IT are better together, right? That conversation about how they work together through the conversation about integration. For ADP, they've just recently launched their integration platform. IT a lot of time likes to build their own APIs. They're like, I don't know that I need an integration platform. So Tim's going to come and talk about value propositions and challenges there. And I'm going to come and talk about what HR needs and why an integration platform really helps them when they're doing their work. And what we're seeing in our data. So yeah, that's a really exciting webinar. That is going to be December 10th. We'll be just getting back to, this will be after everybody sees this from the FATE conference in New York, where we have 4 quickly sold out, already filled up roundtables of finance people coming to talk to HR leaders. I love this, about things like workforce planning and compliance and AI in HR and salary management, just some great stuff. That's going to be November 14th and 13th, so that will have been passed along with the Scottsdale event for iSolved. Click, is there anything else we should probably let people know before we jump into the next level of conversation here?
Yeah, by the time this happens, like you said, the iSolved one will have already passed in there. I will just miss, I'll be in Atlanta, but we haven't mentioned it.
Unit 4, yeah.
The 12th and the 13th for Unit 4. That'll be around the same time. You're at the FATE event, the finance, accounting, technology, but where people could find you as we find a growing audience. And we want to say first, thank you to all of our non-US survey takers, audience members. We have been, as you probably noticed, trying to really grow and learn more and, use this information you've given us. So Stacey's going to, I know it's tough, Stacey, but you'll have to be in Barcelona.
I know. Yeah, I know. It's going to be terrible with that beautiful weather that they're supposed to have that week. Yeah, no, I'll be at Workday Rising EMEA because we didn't get to go to Workday Rising here in the States for many of us. And I will get the opportunity there to sit at the executive roundtable, get some conversation with Rob Etling and a couple of others, Garrett, who is their new CTO. I'm also going to have an opportunity to speak to many of their customers and many of our customers in the EMEA market. I'm hoping to catch up with Sanofi and a couple others that we chat with on a regular basis. What I am really excited about too is that we're going to be talking a little bit about, I think while we're there, some of their partners who are working in the space like Korn Ferry. We'll be talking to them as well. We'll be talking to, I think, Silsoft and a couple others who are in the skills space, in the partnering space. What I love to see is that ecosystem conversation. I've been talking about the idea of sort of platform clusters, who's connected with who and how is that fitting, right? And so we'll be doing a little bit of work in that space too. So it'll be a good week in Barcelona. I have a feeling I'm going to be very, very busy. I do not intend on eating too much paella, but I will. There is a little shop that I know of that has the best paella. If you get to Barcelona, I will give you the name of that shop. It is like 4 little booths and like 2 little tables in the back. And it's like the size of basically my desk as a hallway. And I dream about that.
Yeah, you only need one word in Spanish when it comes to paella.
Yeah.
And the word is mas. Mi mas.
Yeah.
Mi mas paella.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's really great. I think that starts to wrap up towards the end of the year, our travel towards the end of the calendar year. We will be in Charlotte December 2nd and 3rd. We have updated our website with all of this, by the way. If you go to news and views on our website, if this passed you by, you're driving, don't have a free hand, you can go there and check that out. Just news and views on there. Now, you had mentioned ADP, we'll be doing the webinar with. Let's talk about some of the news here. Let's spill some tea.
Get into some tea. I mean, we haven't spilled some tea, but yeah, let's get to some news areas. Yeah. They're doing some acquisitions. They haven't done a ton of them recently, so this is a new one, right?
Yeah, we've got Pequity. I imagine this is a portmanteau word of pay and equity, but ADP has picked them up. They are a compensation management tool. They are one of the newer ones, been around since 2019. But as you know, ADP continues to expand their portfolio. Obviously, compensation management is extremely important. It is fairly native. This is something that has been built on that platform rather than sort of AI inserted in. I think that made it fairly attractive to ADP, who of course already well known for their payroll, but also they're very well known for their data. They've long provided reports that have fueled sort of benchmarking across the industry. So being able to have that sort of flexible AI platform and add to the sort of insights they are able to give, I think is part of what's, behind this acquisition.
Yeah, they picked up Workforce Software last year on the time and attendance side. I mean, ADP's kind of building up. I think they're getting ready for that. They're going to have all the pieces and parts pretty quickly, and especially as they start really building in Lyric, their AI assistant, which we know is being used pretty heavily. Watch this space, as we often say, right?
Yeah, and that really feeds in, right, with Lyric and being able to work with, your enterprise, your global clients. This is, a big part of that, competing in that space. We have some more acquisitions. Learning Pool from Derry, Northern Ireland. Speaking of EMEA in the UK, they had an acquisition, Elucidat. I believe that's right. But so that's pretty interesting, right? Because, you've got a learning platform and Elucidat is authoring, right?
Yeah, Elucidat it's an authoring tool, and they've been around for a little while, I believe, if they're the company that I'm thinking about. So but we are seeing many of the learning content providers, and Learning Pool is a little bit more like a skills / sort of what would have been an LRP back in the day, right? Learning experience platform, kind of as they were putting it together. But I don't think there's a learning technology out there right now that can have a good conversation without talking about content creation, because AI is making that an easier thing. If any place that they're kind of changing the dynamic pretty quickly, faster than I think we thought, it is going to be in this learning space. And so they do have to be picking up tools that are helping organizations not just make content, but take content and tailor it for what they need for their own personal use, right? Because you can't do all the compliance training, you can't do all the content, but you don't want to take content and take it off the shelf anymore and not have it fit into your culture and your environment, right?
Yeah. And, it's the two major pieces, right? Content and delivery. I cannot remember, and I apologize if we had covered this before, but not too long ago, Learning Pool had acquired WorkRamp and LMS.
We covered that one, yeah.
Okay. then we're covering it now.
That doesn't sound familiar, yeah.
So they'd also picked up WorkRamp. So that kind of gave them the sort of full pieces, right? You're off.
Yeah, that gave them the LMS then, which they were, because I guess they had the LXP. So there's not a lot of competitive learning platforms in the market. I mean, the big one is Cornerstone, and then you've got Docebo, and then you've got a couple of other guys that kind of fit around the ancillary side of this, because Cornerstone picked up a lot of the big players in the market back in the day, the SumTotals, the Sabas. And so you have a few big players. Learning Pool is definitely trying to expand their use. And then the other one is all the embedded LMSs inside of the enterprise platforms like Workday and Oracle and UKG. Skooks is the other one that we have tried to kind of follow and track. So it's interesting to see that they're kind of pulling together the whole package here. So we do think we are going to see AI driving a little bit of more rebuilding of this market, because it has basically been a little bit, I think, on the lighter side. I'm excited to see where they take this. So it'll be good to maybe get an update from them and see where they're at.
And since you mentioned Skooks, so this is going to be out of order than we normally do things, but you know my love for a good segue. David Wentworth, who was previously the head evangelist at Skooks, is now going back to the analyst role, where he'll be rejoining Brandon Hall Group. I'd also like to shout him out. I went to his wedding about 4 weeks ago, right before I left for Oracle. That was the night before. So congratulations to Dave Wentworth for the wedding.
For the wedding. Congratulations for the new role as well, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I used to work with Dave back when we were all, I was at Brandon Hall before you were at Brandon Hall, right? So we've all been in this small little world. So yeah, we're wishing him the best of luck in the new role. And Skooks Koo, right? Like, I mean, there's always, these analysts you will find from time to time. I have not been one myself. I don't know, Cliff, of you, but they kind of go back and forth from vendors, right? Get about 2 or 3 years in, then you kind of miss the work you're doing, and we see people come back out again oftentimes. So they're not surprised by that, right? It's not unusual.
Yeah, shout out to our good friend Jason Sala. We talked about that. If you want to hear the sort of inside, spilling the tea on just the analyst community and how that world works, that was our special episode 2 weeks ago with George LaRoque, where we went through some of that. But very interesting. So here we talk about compliance. It was, this is, I think, a large part of this, and even by their own mission, Sage, that we've known for a long time, shows up in a report, has acquired Criterion HCM. So this kind of adds to everything they're doing. And what's really interesting here is that they, being Sage, on this acquisition, really saw 2 things, right? They highlighted that this is a sort of getting work done, not just a system of record. The term that UKG like to use is the word system of action, right? How do we get things done? I really like that. Sage really sees this sort of, embedded AI, especially for that compliance part, is a key factor, right? They see when organizations are scaling, there's rising admin burdens that's sort of adding to the risk, the compliance risk. And the sort of AI-driven HCM that Criterion has gives them the tools to help companies sort of alleviate that risk. And that was one of the major parts. So these organizations are kind of putting their money where their mouth is, right? When it comes to this is truly something that they see as a driving need in the market. So much so that acquisitions are happening for their ability to provide the sort of compliance that's needed.
Exactly. Criterion we saw pop up in the survey, and it was a couple of write-ins, right? Sage doesn't have a huge number, but they do show up in quite a bit of our adoption charts. So the 2 together will give them a better number, right? And we know that Sage, People, HR, all of that, they have got a solution that does show up in quite a bit in our data. So, I mean, acquisition is the name of the game. I think we're going to continue to see it into 2026. Organizations that have basically cash available are going to be going after those organizations who are struggling to get market share. And that's really what's happening, right? Is you can't do AI well without enough market share to have enough numbers to make that make sense.
Yeah, and there's also, I think, a lot of interest in seeing that those sort of organizations, we do the same thing, right? We like to break organizations into size groups. But what we're seeing from UKG, what we're seeing from Oracle, and what we just see here from Sage is, what about those organizations that are doing massive scaling?
Yeah.
They have their own sort of needs, right? They need the support of AI because it just may not be feasible to do that with staff, right? So finding the sort of capabilities that quickly scaling organizations need and giving them tools that they have to provide that.
No, very, very good call out. Yeah, I think one thing that UKG highlighted was their focus on private equity firms, and that private equity, a lot of times when they either do one or two things: they either buy someone to sort of take the pieces and parts and pair it apart, or they buy for rapid growth so that they can basically push it back out again. And I think that's a big area there, right?
And so let's talk a little bit about some other ways you can sort of provide this help to organizations that we're seeing from these vendors. Besides acquisitions, strong partnerships, something that has been just as active as the M&A space. And one of those is from Alight, who I believe showed up very strongly in our report this year.
Yeah, on the benefit side.
Yep, they continue that momentum with a deeper collaboration with IBM to work with the Watson X AI platform provided by IBM for the sort of benefit administration and that part of the experience, right? Yeah. That's another one where you have sort of that meeting of compliance and employee experience when done correctly. And I think that's what they're hoping to see with this collaboration.
Yeah, and IBM Watts is one of those names where you kind of heard it was really big for a while, and then it kind of went away, and now it's kind of coming back up again. And I think we're seeing it being embedded with more. I think this is a strong partnership for Alight. They do have some really great, deep machine learning that now you add on to it the generative AI, and you get some real, I think, depth there. And so it's interesting to see this partnership. I'm excited to see where it goes. Yeah.
Absolutely. Cool funding stories. You love to see it, right?
Always love to see the money flowing. We know what's happening when the money's flowing, right?
Yeah, we should mention, I think we did mention that we're recording this on a Wednesday. We just had a lot of election news that came out. A lot of change happening. Sometimes that creates uncertainty, but it's very interesting to see, in our industry at least, and what we're tracking, we're seeing money flowing. People see positive news ahead. So one of those is $300 million. The deal received and Series E funding, right? So we're 5 rounds in, and at $300 million, that shows that, we had mentioned deal, not always in this super positive sense. I don't mean that they themselves are negative, but just they were embroiled in a little bit of
a little bit of corporate espionage, right?
Right. Or who knows, allegedly, who knows what's going on. But, this is great. This just shows confidence in here throughout all of this. Remember, these organizations are doing business. They're helping other organizations succeed. And clearly, there's value to be seen with this. This is a lot of this comes through Ribbit Capital, along with their longtime partners, Mark Andreessen, through Anderson, Horowitz, and Coteau, General Catalyst as well. So, these are some of the, larger players. And deal continues to grow. And you have 37,000 organizations that they support. So
right, which is huge, right? Which on a global front. And I joking aside, I mean, we all know kind of the rippling conversation that was taking place, right? I mean, that's part of what was happened all of 2025. But what I think this really, for me, when I saw this, I think Deal needed to do this from as much of a brand perspective as they did from just probably a financial perspective. Financials are always important, but I think a brand perspective, this shows, because financial organizations, they rarely invest heavily unless they've done the due diligence to make sure that the leadership is in place, things are doing what they're supposed to do. So I think this will give the market a bit more trust that all the things that happened in the last 6 months to a year are kind of now moved at least to a point where they're being handled appropriately, right, by both organizations. I think the other side of it is also dealing with this, right? And so now we're at a point where, okay, yes, you can safely say this is a solution I can buy into. Same thing with the rippling environment. One of the things that HR people just can't afford to do, and we saw this right around sort of that when some of the banks started, those cyber banks were sort of going down, and the early sort of part of like 2022, 2023, and we saw some payroll companies sort of go under. You can't afford to have your payroll company not be able to have the money to do the banking that you need them to do, right? And you definitely can't afford any of that to cause any issues with your payroll being run. And so these are really important things. You've got to make sure all this is stable. Stability is the biggest conversation here. I think this shows a lot of confidence in that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting too, right? Because we see it's not as much money, but where it's going is interesting too. So Find them, which, sometimes we'll make little sarcastic remarks about some of these names, but that's very on the dot.
It's very on the dot.
Find them, but someone should have thought of that earlier.
And they have a big partnership with Paychex too, right? Like they're not as small as they sometimes seem. They've got a big partnership with some of the big companies, right?
Yeah. Find them does what it says on the tin. They are a candidate sourcing platform, and it's interesting. So they raised $51 million. This is a Series C, so we're 3 in. I'm not counting any of the priors, right? That could have been there. That was led by the P firm SLW. And what's very interesting is this is all about this sort of rapid hiring. This is a tool that's used quite a bit by staffing firms, RPOs, because you need to be able to find them, being candidates, quickly. You need to be able to screen them and move them through the process for when people are scaling and making massive changes. And clearly, as we've seen from all the prior activity and from our own research, this is something that the market knows has value. That's not an insignificant amount for a company that you could say just does one thing, but it does it very well, clearly.
Yep. Yeah, I know very, very much.
And so that reminds me too, that because we talked about UKG's rapid hire and we mentioned Mo, so I did want to follow up on that because while we said that Chatter and Shiftboard had become rapid hire and dynamic labor management, respectively, Mo is now UKG Beacon. So I did want to mention that was the sort of next step with that acquisition. UKG didn't waste any time. They immediately said, we want to incorporate this, be part of that flow of work. And Mo is a engagement, rewards and recognition system, as we said, but now will be part of that entire platform, right? So that'll be in UKG ready and, be able to get all that. And you'll be able to get all the data from that to be able to determine, which of your people are working and celebrate people in that moment of work. So I did want to kind of follow up on that.
And fits very well with their great places to work model, right? With Megalush and the whole team, right? So, I mean, this, again, just adds to that bigger picture they're trying to create, right?
And so, so Deal, hot off the news of that, also has launched some on-demand pay. Stacey, you are very excited about this. You have, I would say, been at the forefront of talking about earned wage access. It used to be, we've actually debated this, should that even be an emerging tech anymore? We're just like, no, this is just something that people are doing.
But it's still not a big percentage of the population, right?
That.
Like, it's still only talked about 13%. Like, I had this conversation online with Anita Lemkin a little bit. We were going back and forth because they're seeing this, right? And Deal is one of the companies that have made a big investment in this. We haven't seen it internationally as much. So this was an interesting one because Deal works so much with international companies. And there are some restrictions around earned wage access internationally. And I was surprised Anita was following up on that because she works so much internationally. I mean, we find that it really adds value both for frontline workers or for hourly wage workers, right? If you've never lived paycheck to paycheck, this is a big tool for that, environment. But it also allows a lot more flexibility for payroll to be able to run immediate needs when there's been mistakes and not have to wait for the next run, which is a big flexibility thing too. This one I think is an interesting one. So they have anytime pay. It's available on the platform now for its employers for which that's the first time I heard it connected to an EOR. That was the one that threw me on this one. I thought, oh, this will be interesting, right?
Yeah, and it's going to be at their EOR clients for no additional cost. It'll be an opt-in, right? You don't have to add it, but a lot of those, could see it as a potential value, I mean, especially when we're looking at those ones, again, looking at the scale and the type of offerings and differentiation for those EOR companies.
There's not a lot of benefits you can offer to contract employees, right? And something like this is a benefit for some of them, right?
Yeah, going back to our data, that was one of the ones that I found frankly shocking. As you mentioned, there was a low uptake in the use of those. And for a while, it's since shifted, but that's only been recent. For a while, we were seeing it more likely to be offered to salaried employees. It was just an easier calculation. There was more of a money pool at hand. But those are not the people who generally need that sort of thing. So it's good to see that sort of shifting and getting it into the hands.
And part of the reason it's not a growing in adoption, I don't think is because it's a lack of need or even a lack of desire from the end users. Our number one reason that we saw in our survey, and we asked this every year right now for the last couple of years, has been leadership doesn't think it's needed. Again, if I'm an executive who hasn't had hasn't had to live paycheck to paychecks for a very long time, if ever, I do think it's an education area there, right, for everybody in the market. I know I also just saw that I think there was an announcement today that Chime, which is Jason Lee, who also started Daily Pay, has another version of this sort of not earned wage access, but earned wage sort of retirement models, right, and funds. They did another big partnership, I think, today I saw with a couple of different vendors. And so we are seeing more of this in the market, right?
Yeah.
What does it really take to lead with impact in today's ever-evolving world? Welcome to Inside the C-Suite, the podcast where influence, energy, innovation, and empathy converge. Hi, I'm Christy Honeycutt, your host. Join me as I sit down with the boldest voices in leadership, visionaries who are not just making decisions, but making a difference. In every episode, we explore the heart of leadership. How do high-performing leaders harness their energy? How do they lead with empathy without losing their edge? How do they turn disruption into innovation and pressure into purpose? You'll hear unfiltered stories of adversity, resilience, and the raw moments that shaped true influence. This isn't about perfection. It's about presence, passion, and the energetic exchange that fuels transformation. Inside the C-Suite is your invitation to lead from a deeper place with intention, connection, and courage. If you're ready to go beyond the surface and unlock what really moves leaders to action, Hit subscribe and step inside. You can find us wherever you get your podcast fix. Inside the C-Suite, well, we're an energetic exchange. Let's lead with influence, live with energy, and create with empathy.
Absolutely. So, kind of talking about adding things on, I was going to talk about, there's some add-ons too, but we're going to see a sunsetting of some features from, we've been kind of talking about some of the smaller, providers out there, but SAP certainly is not small. They're quite large, and there is some sort of major changes happening to the platform in both the rest of this year and going into 2026. And we'll have to talk a little bit about, how does this affect their brand identity? Because that's something you definitely highlighted from this. But we're going to kind of get rid of a lot of the legacy stuff about sign-on and security, ability to do sort of self-service configuration and reporting and support. They're going to be urging people to sort of move on to a lot of the cloud-based security, cloud-based sign-on moving forward. So a lot of that sort of authentication sort of stuff will kind of move away from their old certification and go on to the cloud-based. But they are going to be making some enhancements while at the same time getting rid of the old onboarding enhancements to the new onboarding platform. These are onboarding for processes within SAP, I should point out, not onboarding and what you might be thinking in HR sense.
Yeah, it's sort of onboarding within the SAP and the success factors environment. I think when some of this news first started coming out, there was a little bit of a is success factors the name going to start to go away? We're going to start to see SAP HCM. I haven't heard that as much since it first came out. This has been from their last couple of rounds, and I know they did another update this week with the analysts. We haven't been able to attend any of it because we've been at other events. So I'm hoping I'm going to talk to Lillian and their team and see if we can get an update on sort of where all of this is at, because I would like to get some more understanding of this. But this was a big issue for many of the implementers, the SI teams, because a lot of them focus on, particularly for success factors, that API management, that tech management, the single sign-on management, right? And so when you move all this to that cloud automated environment, and we do know in our data set, ASAP as one of the organizations, interestingly enough, I can't understand, I don't know why, we don't have our data on this, but SAP HCM has just as many people who are saying that they are using AI as SAP success factors. We think part of that's because of the analytics layer that sits on top of SAP HCM that people are sort of so they're moving to S/4HANA or whatever the new version of that is called. So there's just a lot of things going on in SAP that I think is they're trying to get pushed through what we would consider legacy technology, legacy debt, right? So I think we'll hear more about this over time. There's a lot of new things SAP's put out. Some of it we probably should have in our data set, but we just don't have updates, and we'll get that from the team as soon as we can. But this was the thing the market was talking about more loudly, I think, from what we were seeing, and I think is worth mentioning because this could have an impact on a lot of people if they're not paying attention to it, right?
Yeah, and I should mention these changes are happening in 2026, but some of this will go through to 2027 as there's a sort of phasing out of the older sort of reporting tools and sort of pushing the stages of migration towards their newer tools like stories and people analytics, whatever their new support interface is going to be. That's going to all be kind of moving forward into the future. So yeah, that will be interesting to see.
Yeah, maybe we'll even be able to get Luke or Chara on here, and if not, maybe I can do a little meetup with them to see if we can get some sort of understanding of what this looks like in reality, because those are two people that I always depend on from this community who often knows what's going on. Yeah.
So from one SF success factors to another one, Salesforce.
Yeah.
Cornerstone is integrating with Salesforce Agent Exchange, so there'll be AI learning directly into the CRM, which is pretty interesting. So that's really neat. And what do we see again? Learning in the flow of work. That has become the sort of catchphrase, getting things done. We started really thinking of this in the sort of micro learning because it was starting to be kind of, it seemed like it was just an industry thing, right? We thought about it in, banking and in some sort of construction when you need to have compliance or certification tools done right there, flow of work. But now everyone's trying to see the value or is seeing the value of how learning could be done in the flow of work. And this whole idea of pivoting towards the frontline workers being the sort of backbone to these services.
Very much so. We have to give credit where credit is due, because Danny, if he's not a really good marketer, Josh Bersin came up with that term, learning in the flow of work, right? Like that was, I think, his coined term a few years back when he was doing the learning experience platform, which I was like, damn, it's just on the job training, right? Like this is what we used to, this is our on the job performance support training programs. But it really is, I think learning in the flow of work is a better term for it. It works really well. And I think it emphasizes the thing that's most important, which is that you're there doing the work, and at that point in time, at the need is the content and the training and the information. And we're seeing more. And it's interesting how this connection between Cornerstone and Salesforce, many people probably don't know this, but Cornerstone under Adam, who is the first owner of Cornerstone back in the day, so when it was called Cornerstone On Demand, the very first solution before it was Cornerstone On Demand was called CyberU. CyberU was actually built on Dreamforce. So it was built on Salesforce's original platform application. Before then, they moved it off of that into building out what was today's Cornerstone. And I only know this because when I was at Joann Stores, I was looking at them as an LMS, and they literally were shifting their name from CyberU to Cornerstone, and they were literally shifting away from this Salesforce, Dreamforce environment to the new SaaS cloud tool at that point in time. So, everything comes back full circle, right? Like, I mean, Salesforce and Cornerstone have been partners for a long time, left, came back together, got together. But the AI agent, the learning embedded, that's a really powerful tool. I think we're seeing Salesforce lead the conversation, similar to where ServiceNow is in their own space, right, on AI and their market, and really taking a lead here, right?
And speaking of AI agents, let's go. This is kind of interesting. I think we mentioned earlier that, we are now tracking these AI tools because they're HR tools. They're people tools, right?
People tools right now. Yes, everyone's using them. Yes.
So Anthropic, Claude AI, that you might know them from, they have now launched Claude Skills. So it's very interesting, right? It's a real blending of what we'd consider like, okay, these are skills you have in your organization. Now some of those skills might be with people, and some of those skills might be with your AI programs, such as Claude. So the idea is that you would gather and you would create skills and need skills. So some of the examples are given if you needed to change a deck into your branding, colors and scripts and platforms. Well, you would have a brand guideline skill, and you would teach it that. You would create a skill, even to the point of, okay, I need to learn how to build skills for this program. Well, there's a skill creating skill, right? So the idea being that this could be cataloged the way you would catalog any other skill within your organization. It still requires people, right? There's still, as we've talked about, sort of skills that you will need as a person may change because some of those other skills may be moving over. And I think that has been an idea and a concept, and this is the first time we've kind of seen it directly just called AI skills, Claude Skills.
If I think, I know when I threw this out there as an idea and you and I were talking about it, I think you had picked up on it and I picked up both at the same time, and we were like, this is that line crossing in a way that I think HR may not even be paying attention to, right? But yet the idea that you can train it to do the thing you need, that then will help the employee move faster, right? Which is what we've all been envisioning. Can it get there? Because you and I haven't yet been able to get it to do, it can do great PowerPoints, but it can't do PowerPoints the way we need it to do, and do charts the way we need it to. Yeah, that's our issue with AI. If you can get a tool to actually train the way you need it, the way you are, and this is the whole point of all AI, if it can work the way you do, it's going to be really powerful. I haven't tested this out yet, but I think I hear a lot of people are very excited about it. We know Claude is slightly cleaner, and I would say slightly more, they have a little bit more rigor than what OpenAI does with what their environment. So I'm going to watch this closely. We'll probably be playing around with it ourselves. We'll come back and let you guys know what we think about it.
Absolutely. There was some really fascinating talks today, and I'm sorry it's not as late as it is for you, but it's been a long day.
It's late for you too, and you're missing out on your dinner, I think. So,
but it's okay. But I was just going to say, and I'll find the gentleman's name, but he was here at UKG. He's leading their AI sort of efforts in terms of the product and programming. And talked a lot about the challenges in programming AI. And the example he gave was so wonderful, because he said, okay, I'm going to ask you to repeat, finish the follow along, fill in the blank. It's like roses are red, violets are, we're on blue. And he goes, great. So then I type in a prompt, what color are violets? And everyone says blue. And he's like, they're not. They are violet, in fact. Sometimes they can be white, and there are even on some species of red. They are not blue. But you have been trained on that data throughout your entire life. That is exactly what AI does. They would not understand the nuance of that second prompt. It is a fill-in-the-blank machine. So he's like, really, what you need an AI to do is to not have to rely on all that data, because it's not always going to be there. And he actually touched on some of the concerns we've had, is that it's training on incorrect or incomplete data and understanding the context of it. Another funny one that he gave was, there's a big difference between I punched out with my manager today and I punched out my manager today, right? So, those little bits of nuance are very interesting. He said, but if you are creating an agent correctly, if you can create these sort of skills correctly, to stay within those parameters that you mentioned, Stacey, and say, this is what I need. And then it can follow those instructions. You've given it those instructions that it can follow, and then it can do that without needing to consult this giant amount of information that may not be there for one reason or another, or you don't want it going out.
Or that you don't want it to look at it because it doesn't have the right.
Right. Then it's fulfilling its promise because it's done that. And I think that could be, I'm not going to say a game changer because that's very cliche, but it could certainly be that line crossing that you mentioned. That will be that moment.
Yeah, I love those examples. And I think those are the real life examples that people are running into right now. And I think, that's why we don't think AI is as big as the wheel, which is what some people are saying, right? But I do think it is as big as the internet. And if anybody lived before the internet, it was a totally different world between 1990 and 2000. There was that 10 years changed how I worked, right? It changed how you worked. It changed how I went to school. It changed a lot. And we're definitely in that 10-year stasis right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think of it maybe more of a mobile phone, a tool or something that could change how we do work, but fundamentally we do the work. But it could be less too, or it could be more. We'll find out. But certainly we like to always focus on, and it seems like the market's doing this, to focus on exactly what are those tasks that can help, not just what could it do, but let's talk about what it is doing.
What it is doing
now, and then we'll go from there. But yeah, really fascinating, and it is nice to see people sort of acknowledging both the possibilities but also the limitations and figuring out where that's going to come down to. But yeah, I really appreciated those examples as well. So those are some of the ones we're seeing directly from the companies there. All right, so let's talk a bit about some of the people stuff that we've seen going on. You were mentioning Cornerstone. This was big to me. I think my response to you was just a bunch of question marks, or what happened? I don't know. So let's focus on the positive. Maybe how we got there. Karthik Suri is now the Chief Product and Corporate Strategy Officer at Sprinkler, spelled in the modern way where you don't use vowels for some reason. I'll never understand. So that's SPRI. I guess they could afford one. NKLR, which is a customer experience management platform. A unified CXM. I did not know that initialism existed, but there we go. But Karthik, our good friend Karthik, what's going on here?
I know. Who are you going to compare, right? People won't mix you guys up anymore with the two people with the best haircuts in the market, right? So yeah, Karthik and I got to meet Karthik several years back when he joined Cornerstone, as they were sort of going through some of their transitions. And he's really been a voice, I think, in the market for AI at a human level, which I really appreciated, right? I think he saw the vision, he understood the power, of training those solutions. It is definitely going to be a loss, I think, for Cornerstone. On the other hand, I do know Himanshu has several people who are sort of being brought in who have long-time experience from organizations like Google and Amazon, who are going to be backfilling Karthik. And so we'll probably get to hear more about that with some of those new roles coming up soon. But I do want to just say big congratulations. Sprinkler, I think that's how you pronounce it. They are a public company. They are a company that is growing rapidly in this market. I know Karthik couldn't say a whole lot until everything got announced. He's already reached out to me after I, congratulated him, and we're definitely going to have some chats about, we know that customer care and the consumer experience and all of those things are tied tightly to what happens on the business side. And so I think, we're going to see more of these worlds converge. But this was a big win for Karthik. I'm wishing him the best. I think he's got such a vision in this space. I'm sure we'll see him back again in some ways and other ways down the road. But we're just wishing him the best of luck in the new role, and very good pickup by the company, right?
And Cornerstone. This is not a replacement, by the way. It just so happens that Cornerstone has this totally different role. But Cornerstone also had an announcement. They bring in Eric Lee as the SVP for Services and Support. So interesting enough, a lot of Cornerstone news, a lot of movement going in. Eric Lee had been at Smartsheet. I didn't know VMware, I do know, and actually served on the advisory board for the Technology Services Industry Association. So, definitely takes a sort of broad view and bringing that in. It's interesting too, because, I like that they do have this sort of dedicated role and are putting this attention and focus on services and support, something that we have often said that other organizations follow that lead.
Yeah, it's a big one. I mean, for Cornerstone, it's particularly a big one. Have to. Eric is a great move and a step in. Partially because they lost Toya Del Val, who to me was again another great chief customer and officer for organizations sort of in this space. What I think, what we're seeing happen at Cornerstone, like we see in many organizations, is as these leaders grow and develop some really amazing skill sets and capabilities, they get picked up by some of the bigger companies, right, in the market that are outside of the HR and learning space. Happens all the time. We see it over and over again, right? What I am excited about that is his background. Smartsheet is actually an application that I've used back in the past. A great project management tool back in the day, right? And still is. And so I love the business to business capabilities and background, because I know you and I have talked about the fact that a lot of the consumer based stuff doesn't always translate very effectively. So I think on a customer care perspective, that's a really big one. I know he's someone who's worked with Hitachi in the past. VMware is a big company also too, that I think they have some crossover. So I think this is going to be a win for Cornerstone. They need to get more investment here. They're doing that. I know they're also in the process of hiring a new CMO. They've got some new people coming in their product area as well. So I think we're going to see kind of, again, we've just seen this happen over at UKG. You see this in almost all the big companies. Once one person rolls, you see other people in the market start to roll. It's just leadership teams like to work with leadership teams that they bring in, right? I don't think it's going to have too much of an impact on the strategy that Cornerstone's been focusing on, which is that Galaxy long-term talent skills and learning space conversation. What I do think it is going to probably do is it's going to put some spotlights in areas probably that they need to sort of reinvigorate, because that's what happens when you get new people in there, is you get the opportunity to sort of reset the stage a little bit. And I think customer service is one of the areas that they're going to be able to do that in. So he's got a big job in front of him. So welcome to the team, Eric. Well, I'm sure we'll get a chance to talk to him more, right?
Absolutely. And welcome to the board of directors, I guess. Zig Serafin from Qualtrics. Their CEO is moving into a vice chairman role, and they will be searching for a replacement for him at Qualtrics. By the way, Qualtrics, you won an award this year. If you are listening, Zig, if you're hearing this, give us a ring. We've got this award for you.
So we do have to do one. So we do have to do a caveat. One, we use Qualtrics on a daily basis. They are the product that we use to do our surveys and our research with. So what just chat it, like we got to make that aware to known to the market. That's one thing.
Survey though and rate.
But they also end up in the research. They also end up in the research because they have an engagement component to what they're doing now, and particularly an HR engagement, right? And they did very well in that. And yes, their CEO, who's Zig. I mean, that he's been, I don't know all the background, but with them for a very, very long time, right? I think he was there from the beginning. He was at the SAP,
co-founder,
part of the SAP Smith conversation, right? And been at Microsoft. So him sort of going into this new role on the board is just, every company grows, and once they grow, you got to have new people moving. So I think it's just a mention to note that Qualtrics in and of itself, and I think he mentions who's taking his place, doesn't he, in here as well?
They're still searching, although they are going to have some co-CEOs. It will be Jim Whitehurst and Mark Gillett from the board. Will step in as interim co-CEOs in the meantime while they search for that replacement. Of course, Qualtrics, we know, was in our last episode, I believe, through the acquisition of Press Gaming Forsta.
Yeah.
So very interesting. A lot of movement there too.
When things get shaken up, and AI is a really big shaker upper, right? If you put a word to it, right? And it's not a real word, probably not, but it's time when people say, "Oh, this is the time when it makes best for something to bring in some new talent," right? And I think we're seeing that in a lot of places, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. So very interesting stuff going on now. In the interest of our listeners,
ears in time. We may have to
attention
push
rate
some of
and
this off to next couple
not
weeks,
having
right?
your stomach rumble. Let's do a bit of a speed round,
Okay.
Stacey. Let's talk about some ones. I think some of these we're going to end up wanting to talk about more because we just find them interesting. I think we've mentioned before, if you're a new listener, this is the sort of stuff we talk about anyway. I always appreciate compliments, but not criticisms. We have no interest. No, just kidding. If you ever worked with Stacey, you know that she'll say, what could we have done better? I'm very much the opposite. I was like, and how great am I? But one of the things we do get complimented on is it sounds just like a very natural conversation. And I really appreciate that because this really is. You're listening on just what Stacey and I, maybe a little less cursing, but Stacey, I would be talking about this anyway. So let's see if we're able to sort of constrain ourselves to the speed round because some of this is very interesting. Starting off with a bit of a bummer. And especially if you're one of the ones affected, we really feel for you. But they're going to replace over 500 workers. So the story is they're laying off 500 workers, right? Yeah. They're putting out, we're going to be using AI. I don't know. A lot of the chatter is this just a way to sort of gloss over and make it not seem like a downsizing? Yeah, who knows?
We're just going to start putting out the word performative AI layoffs is what it is, right?
I like it. There's this good speed round. We're moving on quickly from that one. Pay scale. And also thank you, Jessica, from PayScale for sending us this. They just had their compensation best practices report. We do cover compensation management, but not to this detail. You know, if you really want to double click, we can kind of give you the market overview. But this one is a very fascinating report. And we always love to see when it sort of backs up the research we're doing too. One that was pretty interesting, nearly half, 44% of organizations say that compensation is more challenging than it's ever been. And only 1/3 of organizations believe that they have a mature, what we would call a strategic approach to compensation. That about tracks with what we've seen as well with organizations feeling that they are taking that long-term strategic approach rather than just meeting benchmarks, let's say.
Yeah, it's a tough industry without a doubt. Yeah, this is a great. They got a great chart. I would go out and look at it at their. It's got all these different numbers on it that I think you can definitely use to kind of understand a little bit about what's happening in the comp market. In this, we often do say that, you know, some of the times the vendors do some of the best research on their own, but do where it is their customers and their clients oftentimes, right? And so you just want to know where the data is coming from, but it's good data to get you to balanced on where you should be at, or at least thinking about it, right?
Yeah, it's about 84 or 86 pages, somewhere around that. So if you want to get into any of the detail in these numbers, probably all of these, you can take this chart, get that overview, but then you can really get into what's driving that. But here's one that's very interesting because this was a story actually we're going to get to in our last episode, a while back, because it really, talk about backing up our own research or backing up our own train of thoughts. Stacey, this was just super fascinating because talk about the hype in AI. OpenAI has long said, we want to be that big change. We are going to be the new wheel, right? We're going to transform business. But then we started looking and we're going, people aren't really using it, in the way that at first that it's meant to be used or that's kind of being marketed, right? It's not being picked up in that embedded AI systems. And that usage was really low. So we started changing the way we asked that question this year, right? We said, okay, are you using the systems provided to you by your HCM? Are you using a system that you've brought? Are you using a different type of AI? Stacey started calling the bring your own AI conversation. And now all of a sudden that's sort of, it's broken containment. Other people are talking about that. And this was a story that we saw kind of getting out in the last couple of weeks. We saw, they have, 700 million active users. The title of this was many of its users, it's not transforming business. They just want life hacks, right? And we're seeing what you use it for, right? You're using it to just make little tasks easier. This goes all the way back to what we were talking about at the very beginning. Oracle is seeing some usage because they started thinking about what is it that people are really trying to do? 73% of the usage were for, online chats rather than the work related. They're using it for that sort of thing. We've seen it quite a bit used for things like job descriptions or just summarizing emails that have been sent. Sometimes you get very long emails. I will say that I don't find myself using it as we talked about. There's some challenges for using it for what we'd like to do. I'd love to be able to say, put this all in our brand colors, right? But instead it might be something that's like, look through these 7,000 comments and tell me what percentage of them were positive or something like that. That would be tough for me to do. Now, I'm not saying it's super accurate, but it's close enough that it will work for most of these are positive, and people complained a lot about the ability to do customization. That's the kind of use you have for AI, and that isn't provided within the systems, right? There might be a sentiment analysis tool given in whichever system we use. I'm sure we haven't mentioned it, but not that, not to the ability to put that in and use it. So what's happening is people are doing that. They're using it for life hacks. I think that's a good way of putting it.
Life hacks I think that's the word we're going that in 2026, life hacks in AI will be the term, right? So I'll put that out there as my theory of the day.
But it goes back to something you have talked about both in your keynote, probably talked about in your keynote before, which is people are bringing their AI to work. This BYOAI isn't just a concept, it's happening. And what are you doing about it? What sort of tools do you have in place? What sort of policies do you have in place? Does that mean then you aren't providing people with the tools that they need? What is the security issues? What are the privacy issues? All this stuff is happening. That number, when we first asked and we said, are you using AI at work? Wow, only 22%. And we said, wait a second, are you using like AI that you've brought? And it's what, near the
1% now? Yeah.
I see. You're right.
Yeah, that's what's happening. Yeah.
What are the repercussions? What does that mean for you as an HR professional? And that's, I think, what we're seeing in these stories.
Very much so. Yeah, we won't, because we did a lot on this on the last one, so I won't go into, because I think there's some other interesting conversations here that you wanted to get into.
Yeah. So there's one that we've seen some talk about, and going into the idea of now the possibilities of AI. The idea of digital twins, you've probably seen this in a number of different stories. Kind of, both Stacey and I like to take a little more of a objective view, kind of look at what are we seeing from the research. So let's talk a little bit about that. We actually found one from Nature, looking at a sort of summarization of a lot of different stories and published studies that have been done on digital and look at some of the positives and negatives. So one of the ideas is being able to sort of what if and scenario model with your sort of twin. The idea of, having that sort of skills there is right. You create something that has your set of skills and, you can sort of use that to, model that and put that forward. I help, sort of run ideas by, put it through a decision-making process. Those are all great. It runs into a lot of the same limitations, though, that you might expect from something like this. Building a truly faithful twin, right? It seems like, it's so simple. I'll tell it everything I know. I don't know how much you know, but hopefully it's not enough that you can do that in one afternoon. You need a lot of, I think the term they use, high quality, timely, and heterogeneous data, right? A lot of different types of data coming in all different areas. We don't always respond to the same stimulus as humans in one day as we would the next, right? In one sort of environment, we change quite a bit. And then also, how do you test that, right? How do I know that twin is acting like me? Right? How do you validate the use of that? If I ask a AI tool to find me a number, find me a quote in the example that I used before, and it doesn't do it, I can say, it failed in that task. If I ask my digital twin to make a decision based on a bunch of data and it makes a decision, how do I know I would have made the same decision or wouldn't have made the same decision? I'm colored by that decision it's now made. We're in real Schrodinger's cat level here.
We're really this is getting deep into the whole science fiction conversation, But we are seeing some of our own HR organizations start to play with this idea. Eightfold's one of them that's got that sort of like track your work model, right? We got a couple others who are doing similar kind of environments, and I think that's where it's coming up. But I do have to go back to science fiction on this one, because if anybody is a Westworld fan, right, and watched the newer version of Westworld, like there was a whole process when you brought online their AI bots, right, which was to test the validity of that robot as to whether or not it had the same personality as whatever you were setting it up to do, right, from the previous personality. And they did that through a series of questions and continuity, and it was a whole continuity test, right? This is the big conversation we had at iSolve this week, and I think I've been having for a while, which is HR's capability and skills are going to become more relevant than they have ever been, because we are the only function that understands how to deal with a entity, and I call it entity right now, an entity that doesn't always make the same decision twice, right? We are the only ones that think about behavior-based changes, about training, about performance reviews, about calibration of a human being's perspective, right? Biases. All of that's going to come into this play, especially as you start thinking about something like a digital twin, right?
That is fascinating. I'm not BSing listeners, viewers. I had not thought of it like that before, in the sense that if you work in finance, if you work in IT, with some, we've talked a lot about that. Those are things that if this, then that, right? If you got 6 and you add 8 to it, you're in finance, that'll come out to 14 every time. If you're in, you've got a logic gate in IT. If there's a problem, you can always find the issue, and then you'll know it's working because the same inputs will yield you the same results. That is not how humans work, nor will they ever, nor would you want them to. The idea is that they are meant to be a bit of a black box, but that doesn't mean there aren't things like motivation and, human psychology and all the things that make you an effective leader and make you an effective HR person. We're the ones uniquely designed to deal. You're right. We can't force this technology into the box of, if this, then that, because that's not what we're asking it to do. We're asking it to replicate human behavior. And that means you need someone that's an expert in that.
Yeah, that's welcome to our world. We are the most relevant people in the world right now. That's what I'm going to say.
Well, I've always thought that about myself. Thank you for my ego trip hour.
All right, Cliff, bring us home. We're coming down to the last few. I think.
I have to throw this one, throw some shade. We're spilling tea. Might as well throw this one out here. I don't know whether we were on the hype part of the AI.
Yeah, if they're still listening, they get down to this part.
This one definitely is the nadir here. Deloitte, this was probably 3 or 4 weeks ago, was forced to pay the Australian government about 440,000 Australian dollars because an AI generated report was found to have hallucinations, which is a nice way of saying it was wrong, very, very wrong.
And it was one that they put together for the government and the financial services and all the whole, and like, ooh, this is not where you want to have. And it was a group of younger, Deloitte team members who had put it together. I do feel for them. I'm sure someone got a really, really loud performance conversation after this, right?
That's right.
But yeah, don't give out a report. Cliff and I talk about this all the time. Do not AI slop. It is a thing, right? Don't just print and send out, right? Just don't.
Yeah. That's actually a brilliant segue. Now, see, I used to do the segues. I take back all my ego. You're taking over. You do it all now. So this was a very interesting post. This comes from Frank Camaro or Camaro. I apologize, Frank, if I'm mispronouncing your name. Called Beyond the Machine. And he posits this very interesting, well-written post talking about how AI could be viewed using some of the most well-known creatives. Rick Rubin, the producer for a number of things. I always think of him as the Beastie Boys guy, but Hayao Miyazaki, a few others. That's Studio Ghibli's head. And thinking about different ways of viewing AI. And fundamentally, the parallel he likes to use is instead of it being a tool or a servant, AI is an instrument. And there are different ways to approach the using of an instrument or the playing of an instrument or how you might do it. And that struck a chord with you, no pun intended, but I do appreciate that I came up with that on the spot with you, Stacey, right?
It did. I really love this image, and I think it actually fits better than what all these other boxes we've been trying to put it into, which is we talk a lot about orchestration, that AI does the orchestration, but I think actually humans kind of do we have to kind of figure out the world that we're in, and AI is one of those components, and how you leverage it, how you use it. It's like an instrument, and you could use it really well, or you could use it not so well. I played the clarinet. There was, for a couple of years I was first chair. Y'all know what that is. That means I was doing really good. There's a lot of years that I was in the back of that row, right? And I was not doing that instrument very well. And I think this is a lot of where it's going to be at, right? We're all going to have good AI and bad AI. It's going to come down to how it's managed effectively as an instrument, right?
Yeah. But I couldn't mention Miyazaki without mentioning he Studio Ghibli famously hates AI. So I did find it a little interesting that you used an example.
They used him in this.
Yeah, he had come out and said that it made an interesting point about the creative process, talking about a friend of his who could barely use his arm and hand, likely I think referencing how much they had spent time drawing. His films never use any sort of computer, it's all hand drawn, and it's beautiful, but he makes, and this is going to be some strong words, it's not cursing, but he said, whoever creates this stuff has no idea what pain is whatsoever. I am utterly disgusted. I strongly feel that this is an insult to life itself. Talking about that we learn not just from the sort of positive experiences, right? We learn not just from doing, but we learn from the pain. We learn from our mistakes. Maybe like those Deloitte people, hopefully they learn from that and they learn to be more creative. Yeah. I'm going to tie it all together.
I really do agree with him. I mean, biggest lessons have been, and it's one of probably my biggest flaws as a leader and a manager is I really hate making people, I don't want anybody to feel the pain, right, that I did. But it is how you learn, right? Like that is the world that we are in on some level. It is something sometimes to remember. And we do have to think about that with the AI conversation. Right?
This one I'm going to do quick speed round, super fast. I might just do this. I just wanted to point out, because we have contingent workforce management in the paper this year, and Christopher Niebel made a great post. We'll of course have the links to all of this. When he went to the Contingent Workforce Strategy Summit, with everything going on with the paper, we didn't have time, but it is an area we are covering more and looking at the vendors in that space. And it was pretty interesting. Some of the takeaways that he had was that people are really thinking of as talent first, not category first. This almost goes back to the skills conversation. HR, this is definitely a conversation we've been having for a long time and have quite a bit of data on, that HR is really taking control of this external workforce, as they should be, for all of the reasons we've mentioned over and over again, but we're seeing that playing out in real time. So, and what was very interesting is he recommended, starting with governance and collaboration rather than the tools, right? So, put your collaboration, put your compliance forward. And speaking of compliance, one from Target employees that had a wage dispute was settled for $4.6 million. If you want a clear example of how important compliance is and why it is that we're seeing all of this movement, look no further than this story right here. The Target warehouse employees reached a $4.6 million settlement from a lawsuit because it was about pay for time spent. The time they spent moving through the warehouse. This was definitely one of those ones where you'd say the right system could have solved this immediately.
Well, and it was like moving through the environment, walking to their cars, like how long they were making them walk and not log in. Again, these are just very basic things, but a little bit of knowledge saves you a lot of money on this, right?
Yeah. Pretty interesting story about Microsoft and OpenAI's quote unquote partnership. A lot of good analogies about, how much of this is a true partnership and how much of it is, I think in this post, they called an uneasy marriage. The line I also like from it is, this comes, let's see, it was the poster that put this one out. Oh, this is Sonia.
Yeah.
Before, this deal is less master-servant, more mutual hostage situation. Right, yeah, so hopefully it's not a full Thelma and Louise here, but
my favorite one in this one is that they've now put in place, like, what happens when AI becomes sentient, like who gets what, like that was part of this agreement because they had to remap. I was like, okay, all right, like we're gonna get there, but that it's in their agreement now, right?
That's right. Was this MSA? Yeah. So there was another one from this post was about a really interesting concept. Again, we're going to have this linked in so you can kind of join in the conversation, listeners, but it was about, you have your content creation that could be done through AI. But for a lot of the limitations that we've talked about, sometimes content creation may not be the true strength in learning for AI. What it could be is AI instructional designers, right? So of AI-driven systems, that are more in charge of delivering the content, finding the right time based on location, sort of the where and when, and tailoring that content rather than the creation of that content. And that could be really where value is found rather than in the creation of the content itself, which could fall victim to some of these hallucinations and errors.
Yeah, this one hit me a little bit because my master's degree is in instructional technology and instructional design. That was where I started out in HR, was in instructional design. And it's like, oh, you're replacing the instructional designers. Not exactly saying that, but it's a really good read for those who are in the learning space to think about how those roles are morphing. And like anything else, you got to stay on top of it. Right?
All right. So here's the final one I think we'll do, because Stacey, you sent this to me. I guess we've outed ourselves enough times as nerds on this. So sorry, everyone. Sorry, all the jocks can sign off now. But this was fascinating for a couple of different reasons. I think we're both fans of The Witcher show and the game, and the company that created the game based on the books, where it all started, CD Projekt Red, was looking for a new lead producer. And Stacey found that interesting and then sent it along and says, take a look at these benefits. I said, okay. And we both found some just amazing things. I'll pick a couple that I love. The dog-friendly office. Bring your dog with you every day, and you can look after them, and they have all that set up for them. All sorts of learning stuff. But the one that I think both of us loved is menstrual leave.
Right? Like, I'm like, come on. first of all, for just the putting together some equity and thinking about benefits that are going to be valuable for females as well as men, right? On different levels. Yeah, I think it was like 1 day a month they got a menstrual leave. And I'd heard about it. I'd never seen it in a full-on posting. And this is a position, when I sent it out to both Cliff, and I did send it to my son, who, by the way, is into the gaming industry as well. And I said, I'm not trying to get neither of you are for a new job. Y'all are good where you're at, right? But I was like, this is like, we know how many people want to be in that industry. The fact that they are putting together this massive amounts of all kinds of the traditional benefits on top of some of these, what I would say are very, very new sort of benefits that we're seeing in the market. It was an interesting dialogue. And it went to show, again, that conversation about AI, humans, not. Sometimes it just comes down to that most human of conversation, which is, do you understand the people who are working here and what they're dealing with every day, right?
I also appreciated the wording in the post. They said employees who menstruate can take 1 extra day off when experiencing period pain. So first of all, great inclusive language, not saying who might need that, but also it's sort of contingent upon you to decide, if it's for pain. It's not that you need to prove anything. Just brilliant. And like you said, just really makes it human. There's also, a lot of just really cool stuff. I do find it funny, though. 4 weeks when you start, 5 weeks after 2 years of paid time off. Anyone that's worked in gaming knows, yeah, good luck with that.
Take any time off. They sleep under the desks is half the time, right? Like that's, yeah. And it's getting a little bit better, but we know some people and our friends who are in that industry. Cliff, we have just boiled the ocean on this one. I think we were well over an hour and a half, almost 2 hours today with our audience. You need to get some food. I need to get some sleep. So yeah, but just thank you to everybody. I mean, hopefully this gives you just a little bit of what's happening in the market. We can't keep up with all of it. We know you can't keep up with it. Hopefully we give you a little bit of time for that. But we are going to wrap today so that we can get everybody back to where they need to be. A couple of big pushes. Like we said, the big annual report is out. Be sure to access it. If you have access to it, be sure to download it. Also purchase it if you have an opportunity to purchase it. Also, we will, as I said, be sure to listen to our sister HR Huddle podcast, HR We Have a Problem, hosted by our CEO, Terry Zipper, and any other HR Huddle episodes. If you like them, you want to hear more about them, go to our work-defined environment and be sure to put a click up. Let us know how you're doing. We are growing our audience every day, but we always love to hear how that's working for you. To stay up to date with immediate breaking HR tech news and get all the behind the scenes content, you can follow us at Sapient Insights on LinkedIn and Instagram and Facebook. We do quite a bit of updates on Facebook this day as well. So Cliff, thank you. As always, you put together a massive amount. When you told me how long it took you to do this today, I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. You guys have to, I will send Cliff 6 stories at a time, and he gets his own stories too. And I'm like, hey, look, this is cool. This is cool. So he does a massive job pulling all of this together. I used to do this one previous podcast. I know how hard it is. It is a really big effort. Then he summarizes it. So really big win for all of us. A big thank you to Brand Method Media Group, who helps us produce our podcast and run by their amazing founder, Kelly. Thank you to our marketing team, Summer Orlano, Cole Harris, Linda Galloway, Caitlin Diamond now, Kendall Lowry. All have hands down in making sure this gets out to the market on a regular basis. And most of all, thank you to our listeners and our community. We couldn't do this without you. You guys give us something to talk about every week, and we hope that it is adding value to your day-to-day lives. And that's it for this episode of Spilling the Tea on HR Tech. We hope it has been just the brew you needed to get your engine started this week. And we'll be back in 2 weeks with another pot of boiling hot HR Tech updates and insights. Bye, everyone.